He was the most powerful man in England, a duke with a stare as cold as his fortune was vast. She was a nobody, a shadow in a borrowed dress, invisible to everyone, except him. Tonight, at the glittering Devonshire House ball, a dance they never should have had, will end in her total humiliation. She will flee into the London night, running from a world that despises her, leaving behind only a single, worthless-looking glass pendant. But what the Duke of Ashworth is left clutching isn't just a piece of glass, it's a key, and it will unlock a secret of betrayal, fraud, and a lost inheritance that will bring the entire aristocracy to its knees. The air in the Mayfair townhouse at number 17 Bruton Street was thick with the scent of hot irons and lavender water. Rosalind Hayes, 20 years old and invisible, expertly laced the back of Beatrice Finch's whalebone corset, her fingers nimble, but her knuckles white. "Tighter," Beatrice snapped, her voice muffled as she stared at her reflection. "I must have an 18-inch waist. The Duke of Ashworth will be at Devonshire House tonight. I will not be overlooked." Rosalind pulled, bracing her foot against the small stool. "Any tighter, Miss Beatrice, and you will not be able to breathe, let alone dance. Your opinion is not required, Hayes," snipped Lady Honoria Finch, Beatrice's mother, sweeping into the room. She was a woman carved from ice, her gaze sweeping over Rosalind with dismissive appraisal. "You are paid to be a companion, not a couturier. Now fetch the pearls, and see to it my daughter looks like a debutante, not a companion." The barb was intended to sting, and it did. Rosalind, orphaned and penniless, was Lady Honoria's companion, a title that was a polite fiction for a high-status servant. She was educated, her supposed vicar father having taught her Latin, Greek, and philosophy, but in this world, education without bloodline or dowry was a liability. It made one uppity. Her only treasure, the one thing that was truly hers, was the small, teardrop-shaped pendant she wore on a simple silver chain, hidden beneath the drab grey wool of her day dress. It looked like common glass, but it had been her mother's. Her mother, who had died in a damp cottage in Dorset, whispering of London and lost promises, pressing this pendant into Rosalind's hand. "It is your whole story, my love," she had whispered. "Do not lose it." Rosalind had never understood what she meant. To her, it was simply a link to a past she barely remembered. "And you, Hayes," Lady Honoria said, breaking her reverie. "You will, of course, be attending." Rosalind's head snapped up. "My lady? Don't look so hopeful. You will attend as Beatrice's companion. You will carry her shawl, her vinaigrette, and her fan. You will stand by the chaperones, and you will not, under any circumstances, speak unless spoken to. You are a piece of furniture. Is that clear?" "Yes, my lady." "And you cannot wear that," she said, gesturing to Rosalind's grey dress with disgust. "Beatrice, give her the old silk, the pale blue one you spilled champagne on. It will have to do." Hours later, Rosalind stood in her own small attic room, looking at her reflection. The dress, a cast-off, had been skillfully repaired by her own hand. The pale blue silk made her unusually bright, auburn hair seem like fire, and her grey eyes look like polished silver. For the first time, she didn't look like a shadow. She tucked her glass pendant outside the dress. It was her one act of defiance. It rested on her collarbone, a small, clear teardrop of courage. Devonshire House was a palace of light in the London gloom. A river of carriages disgorged the glittering jewels of the Tun. Rosalind, walking 10 paces behind Lady Honoria and Beatrice, felt her stomach clench. She had never seen such wealth. The staircase itself was a marvel of marble, and the ballroom, with its soaring ceilings and 10,000 candles, seemed to be populated by gods, not people. And in the centre of them all, like the dark star around which they all orbited, was him, Alistair Vane, the Duke of Ashworth. He was tall, with severe, handsome features that looked as though they had never softened into a smile. His black evening attire, tailored to perfection on Savile Row, made him stand out against the pastel-coloured debutantes. He was known as the Iron Duke, impossibly wealthy, ruthlessly intelligent, and utterly bored by the society he commanded. As Lady Honoria and Beatrice advanced on him, Rosalind slipped away, finding her assigned spot near a potted palm, becoming the furniture she was ordered to be. She watched Beatrice simper and preen, and watched the Duke's eyes glaze over. His gaze drifted, scanning the room with profound indifference. And then his eyes stopped. They met hers. Rosalind froze. Her heart didn't just flutter. It stopped. It was supposed to be impossible. He wasn't supposed to see her. She was the shadow, the grey woman, the wallflower. He held her gaze for an impossibly long moment. He saw her, not as furniture, but as a person. Rosalind, terrified of Lady Honoria's wrath, broke eye contact, her cheeks burning. She stared at the marble floor, praying for invisibility to return. But it was too late. The most powerful man in England had seen her, and the night, for better or worse, was no longer about Beatrice. Alistair Vane, Duke of Ashworth, despised the London season. He despised the simpering debutantes, the scheming mothers, and the obsequious fathers who all saw him not as a man, but as a title, a collection of estates, and a vault of gold. He was a prize to be won, and he was tired of being hunted. He had been dutifully listening to Lady Honoria Finch drone on about her daughter Beatrice's many accomplishments that seemed to consist entirely of needlepoint and a passable rendition of a Mozart sonata. Miss Finch herself was staring at his cravat with a vacant, predatory hunger. It was then that his gaze had drifted, desperate for any reprieve, and found her. She was standing near the alcove, half hidden by a monstrous fern. She was not dressed in the height of fashion. The pale blue silk of her gown was at least 2 seasons old, but it fit her perfectly. She wore no jewels, save for a simple, clear pendant on a chain. But it was her face that captured him. It was intelligent, sharp, and profoundly, beautifully sad. She looked like a prisoner, a scholar trapped in a cage of fools. And when he met her eyes, he saw not the coy flirtation he expected, but a flash of genuine, startled life, followed by a wave of pure panic. She had looked away as if he had burned her. He had seen enough. "Lady Honoria, Miss Finch," he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that cut through the chatter. "You must excuse me." Before they could protest, Alistair moved. He didn't stride. He flowed through the crowd, a panther parting a flock of pigeons. The ton watched, mothers holding their breath, wondering which fortunate daughter was about to be plucked from obscurity. Rosalind was trying to make herself smaller, her back pressed against the damask wallpaper. She was mentally calculating how many weeks' wages Lady Honoria would dock for this transgression, when a shadow fell over her. She looked up. And up. The Duke of Ashworth was standing directly in front of her. The noise of the ballroom seemed to recede. "I do not believe we have been introduced," he said. His voice was not cold as she'd expected. It was deep and unexpectedly gentle. Rosalind's throat was dry. I am no one, Your Grace. You are merely the most interesting person in this room," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. He offered a gloved hand. "May I have this dance?" Rosalind's blood turned to ice. "Your Grace, I cannot. I am here in service to Lady Honoria," Nonsense, Alistair said, his eyes not leaving hers. This is a ballroom, not a scullery. You are a guest. He didn't wait for her to accept. He simply took her hand, a gesture of such authority that she had no choice but to follow him onto the dance floor. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Rosalind could feel Beatrice's stare like a hot poker in her back. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Alistair put his hand on her waist, and she was forced to put her hand on his shoulder. She was trembling. "You are shaking," he murmured, his voice for her ears only as they began to move. "You have just secured my dismissal, Your Grace." "Then I shall hire you. What is your name?" "Rosalind Hayes." "Rosalind, from the Latin, Rosa Linda." "Beautiful Rose. It suits you." She flushed. "My father was a scholar, Your Grace. He was a vicar." "Was. He passed, as did my mother." "So you are alone?" It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. He saw it in her, a resilience. They moved in perfect time. To her surprise, she was a good dancer. Her father had believed a proper education included everything, from philosophy to dancing. Alistair was a superb lead, strong and effortless. For 3 minutes, Rosalind forgot she was a servant. She forgot the prying eyes, the whispers, the burning hatred of Lady Honoria. She was just a woman, dancing with a man. "You look at these people," he murmured, his eyes sweeping the room, "as if you are cataloguing them for a novel." "And you, Your Grace," she replied, finding a sliver of courage. "Look at them as if you are a general deciding where to place your cannons." He stopped. They were in the middle of the floor, but for a second, he just stopped. Then he threw back his head and laughed. It was not a polite chuckle. It was a real, rich, startled laugh. The entire ballroom froze. The Iron Duke didn't laugh. The sound was like a thunderclap, and it re-energized the room. He was enchanted by a nobody. "Tell me, Miss Hayes," he said, his eyes sparkling with genuine amusement, "what do you do when you are not in service?" "I read, Your Grace. I read everything I can find. Mr. Hatchard's bookshop on Piccadilly is my idea of heaven." "A reader," he mused. "I should have known. For a person who can be charmed by a novel, other pleasures are vulgar. I've always found that to be true." Rosalind's eyes widened. "You are quoting... That's from Northanger Abbey." "It is," he said, smiling. He had found her, a mind that matched his, a woman who quoted Jane Austen instead of simpering about the weather. He was lost. The music swelled to its finale. He held her hand for a moment longer than was proper. He looked down at the simple pendant on her neck. "A pretty piece of glass," he said softly. "It was my mother's," Rosalind said, her hand instinctively rising to cover it. "It is all I have of her. It is lovely." He escorted her off the floor, but he didn't release her. He led her toward the terrace, away from the chaperones, away from the prying eyes. He wanted to know everything about her. But they never made it. A voice, high and shrill as a shrieking bird, cut through the air. "What do you think you are doing?" Beatrice Finch, her face a mask of puce-coloured rage, stood before them. Lady Honoria was right behind her, her expression murderous. The dance was over. The dream was dead. The music, which had seemed so beautiful moments before, stuttered into a discordant silence. The whispers that had been a low hum now rose to a crescendo. Everyone was watching. "Beatrice, contain yourself," Lady Honoria hissed, but her eyes were fixed on Rosalind, twin chips of ice. "No, mother, I will not." Beatrice's voice was trembling with a lifetime of jealousy and entitlement. She pointed a finger at Rosalind, her diamond rings flashing like weapons. This thing, she is my mother's paid companion. She is a servant." The word hung in the air, ugly and final. Servant. Rosalind felt the blood drain from her face. She wanted to evaporate. She stepped back, but Alistair's hand instinctively found her elbow, steadying her. The small protective gesture only enraged Beatrice further. "She is wearing my old dress," Beatrice shrieked, now playing to the crowd, her humiliation at being snubbed turning into a public execution. "A dress I gave to the scullery, and she dares to dance with the Duke of Ashworth. She is nothing but a common thief and a social climbing—" "That is enough, Miss Finch," Alistair said. His voice was no longer gentle. It was low, dangerous, and crackling with the full authority of his station. The temperature in the ballroom dropped 10 degrees. "The lady is my guest for this dance." "She is not a lady," Lady Honoria interjected, her voice smooth and venomous. She saw her daughter's chances with the Duke evaporating and turned her wrath on the true source. "She is a penniless orphan we took in out of charity. She has abused our kindness, Your Grace. She is manipulative and deceptive." "On the contrary, Lady Honoria," Alistair replied, his gaze unwavering. "Miss Hayes has been the only person this evening to speak with any honesty. I find it refreshing." This was a declaration of war. By defending Rosalind, the Duke was publicly shaming the Finches. Beatrice, realizing she had lost, went for the final, cruelest blow. Her eyes fixed on the pendant. "And look at that!" she spat, lunging forward. "That piece of junk, pretending it's a jewel. Is that glass, Hayes? Did you steal it from a chandelier?" Beatrice was not aiming for the pendant. She was aiming for Rosalind's face. Rosalind flinched back, raising her hands to protect herself. Alistair moved to intercept, but he was a moment too late. Beatrice's hand, instead of striking Rosalind's cheek, caught the simple silver chain around her neck. The chain snapped. Rosalind screamed, a small, horrified sound. It happened in an instant. The pendant flew from her neck. Alistair, with the reflexes of a fencer, snatched it from the air before it could hit the marble floor. Rosalind stared, her hand at her bare throat. Tears, hot and instantaneous, welled in her eyes. It was broken, her mother's last gift, her one connection to her past. Broken, violated. The room was utterly silent. The cruelty of the act had shocked even the most jaded gossip. Rosalind looked at the pitying faces, the sneers, the shock. She looked at Beatrice's triumphant, ugly smirk. She looked at Lady Honoria's cold satisfaction. And finally, she looked at the Duke of Ashworth, who stood with his fist clenched, her entire world resting in his palm. He looked back at her, his face a mask of fury and a strange, deep concern. "Miss Hayes," he began. But she couldn't breathe. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her chest. This was not her world. She was a mouse in a den of lions, and she had been played with and broken. With a sob that tore from her soul, Rosalind turned and fled. She didn't walk. She ran. She pushed past gaping lords and ladies, her borrowed blue dress a blur. She ran from the ballroom, down the grand marble staircase, shoving a footman aside at the great oak doors. "Rosalind!" Alistair's voice echoed behind her, a commanding roar, but she didn't stop. She burst out into the cool, damp London night, her thin slippers skidding on the cobblestones. She ran into the darkness, tears streaming down her face, leaving behind her dress, her job, her reputation, and the only thing she had ever owned. Alistair Vane stood frozen for a moment, the entire ballroom staring at him. He looked at Lady Honoria and Beatrice with a look of such concentrated loathing that they both physically recoiled. Then he turned and stalked out of the ballroom, ignoring the calls and whispers. He reached the entrance, but she was gone, vanished into the labyrinth of Mayfair. He stopped under a gas lamp, the sounds of the party fading behind him. He slowly opened his gloved hand. There, in his palm, lay the pendant. It was, as Beatrice had shrieked, not a diamond. It was simple, clear. Glass? No, it felt different. He looked closer. It was rock crystal, not glass, and the silver setting, though simple, was old and finely wrought. He'd been about to put it in his pocket when his thumb brushed against the side. He felt a seam, a tiny, almost invisible hinge. It wasn't just a pendant, it was a locket, but as he examined it, he saw no clasp to open it. No place for a fingernail. Instead, near the delicate point at the bottom, he saw something else, a tiny, impossibly intricate hole. His brow furrowed. He knew mechanics. He knew design. This wasn't a locket, and that wasn't a flaw. It was a keyhole. The following morning, Alistair Vane sat not in his study, but in the most exclusive and discreet private room of Garrard's, the Crown Jewellers on Pendant Street. Before him sat Mr. Sebastian Lowe, the firm's most senior gemologist and antiquarian. Alistair had not slept. Rosalind's tear-streaked face was burned into his memory. He had spent the dawn hours dispatching his private agents, men who normally tracked investments and political rivals, with a new, singular task. Find a woman named Rosalind Hayes, formerly of Bruton Street. On the velvet cloth between them lay the pendant. Mr. Lowe peered at it through his loupe, his movements precise and reverent. "Fascinating, Your Grace, utterly fascinating." "It's just glass, isn't it?" Alistair asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Oh, heavens, no," Mr. Lowe scoffed softly. "Glass is vulgar, Your Grace. It scratches. It clouds. This is hand-carved Brazilian rock crystal, and of a quality I have not seen in decades. The setting is, I would say, late 17th century French silver. See the craftsmanship. This was not made by a common jeweller. This was made by a locksmith." He confirmed Alistair's suspicion. "It is a key, Your Grace. A very specific, very complex, and I would wager, very valuable key. It is designed to look like a simple bauble, a sentimental piece. But this is a masterpiece of concealment. A key to what? A box, a dispatch box, a lady's secretaire, or perhaps a document safe. One with an equally disguised lock. The mechanism would be inside the keyhole. This pendant would act as the bit. It is, if you will, 1,000,000 to 1 chance. The lock and key are a matched set. Without the box, the key is a curiosity. Without the key, the box is impenetrable," Alistair finished. He now understood. Rosalind's mother hadn't given her a trinket. She had given her the only thing that mattered. He left Garrard's with the pendant secure in his pocket. His obsession had deepened. This was no longer just a quest for a beautiful, wronged woman. It was a mystery. He returned to his townhome in Grosvenor Square to find his head agent, a grim-faced man named Shaw, waiting for him. "We found her, Your Grace," Shaw said, without preamble. Alistair's relief was so profound, it almost buckled his knees. "Where is she? Is she safe?" Shaw's expression was bleak. "Not exactly. She never returned to Bruton Street. Lady Honoria dismissed her in absentia last night. Her belongings were thrown into the mews. She spent the night, we believe, walking. We located her an hour ago in Covent Garden." "Covent Garden? What is she doing there?" "She was attempting to sell the only thing she had left of value, Your Grace." "The blue silk dress." Alistair felt a cold fury, followed by a wave of shame. While he had been at his jeweller's, she had been destitute, selling her gown for pennies. "She's at a lodging house in 7 Dials, Your Grace. A very unpleasant place. She paid for 1 night. Have my carriage brought around. Now." "Your Grace," Shaw hesitated. "If I may be so bold, Your arrival in 7 Dials in a ducal carriage. It will cause a riot. It will put Miss Hayes in more danger. Let me retrieve her. I can bring her here." Alistair fought his instincts. Shaw was right. No, not here. Not yet. It would compromise her. Rent the entire floor of the Clarendon Hotel. Send a respectable carriage, a simple brougham, no crest. Have a doctor meet her there. And Shaw, Your Grace, buy the dress back from the pawn shop, at any cost. It took 2 hours. 2 hours that Alistair spent pacing his study like a caged lion. Finally, Shaw returned. "She is installed at the Clarendon, Your Grace. The doctor has seen her. Exhaustion, dehydration, and a deep sense of shock. But she is strong. She fought me, Your Grace. She thought I was arresting her." The words hit Alistair like a physical blow. Arresting her? For what? "Lady Honoria Finch," Shaw said, his voice flat. "She filed a report with the constables at Bow Street this morning. She is accusing Miss Hayes of theft." "Theft? Of what?" "A diamond necklace. Lady Honoria claims it went missing from her boudoir yesterday afternoon, and that Miss Hayes was the only one with access." Alistair stopped pacing. The move was as brilliant as it was evil. It wasn't about the necklace, which Alistair was certain was safely hidden in Lady Honoria's own jewel box. It was about silencing Rosalind. If she was a wanted thief, no one would ever believe her word against a lady of quality. The Duke of Ashworth defending a common criminal? It would be a scandal he couldn't afford. Lady Honoria was trying to checkmate him. "Your Grace," Shaw said, "the constables are actively searching for her. If they find her—" "They will not," Alistair said, his voice dropping to that lethally quiet tone. "Shaw, send a message to Sir Robert Peel. Tell him I need a personal favour. I want every constable in Bow Street pulled from this case and reassigned. Then send a message to my solicitor at Lincoln's Inn. I want every piece of financial leverage we have on Lord Finch's businesses brought to my desk. We are going to war." He picked up his hat and gloves. "Your Grace, where are you going?" "To the Clarendon," Alistair said, his jaw set. "Lady Honoria wanted to ruin Miss Hayes. She has, in her arrogance, mistaken her opponent." The suite at the Clarendon Hotel was larger than the entire attic floor Rosalind had inhabited on Bruton Street. A fire blazed in the hearth, and a doctor had just given her a mild sleeping draught, which she had politely refused to drink. She sat on a plush chaise longue, still wearing the simple walking dress Shaw had procured for her, the pawned blue silk dress now lying, cleaned and pressed, on the bed. She was terrified. She was no longer a servant, but she wasn't free. She was a prisoner, albeit a gilded one. Shaw, the grim-faced man, had been respectful, but firm. "The Duke requires you to be safe." She was safe from the cold, but she was not safe from Lady Honoria. The accusation of theft was a death sentence. She would be sent to Newgate, transported. The thought made her physically ill. There was a firm knock on the door. Shaw opened it, and the Duke of Ashworth entered. He looked different from the night before. Gone was the immaculate evening wear. He wore riding boots, dark trousers, and a severe cutaway coat. He looked less like a duke and more like a force of nature. He dismissed Shaw with a nod, and the two of them were alone. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice low, "are you well?" "You should not be here, Your Grace," she whispered, her hands clenched in her lap. "To be found with me. I am an accused thief." "You are accused of nothing," he said, walking to the fireplace. "You are the victim of a malicious lie. It doesn't matter. Her word against mine. I am ruined." "No," he said, turning to her. You are not. As of an hour ago, the Bow Street runners are no longer searching for you, and as of 10 minutes ago, Lady Honoria Finch has personally, and with great distress, withdrawn her complaint. Rosalind stared. What? How? It seems Lady Honoria found her missing necklace, tucked away in a different case, a simple, silly mistake. He allowed himself a grim smile. It was found after my solicitor reminded her husband, Lord Finch, that the mortgages on his last 3 properties are held by a bank that I, and I alone, control. Rosalind was speechless. He had wielded his power like a bludgeon, all for her. Why? She finally asked. Why would you do this? For a stranger? A servant? Alistair walked closer, stopping a few feet from her. He reached into his coat pocket. Because, Miss Hayes, I believe this belongs to you. He held out his hand. In his palm lay the pendant, its silver chain neatly repaired by the jewellers at Garrard's. Rosalind let out a small, choked cry. She didn't move to take it. She just stared at it. I had it, examined, he said quietly. It is not a trinket. It is a key. Rosalind's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide and startled, met his. The fear was gone, replaced by a new, sharp intelligence. How did you know? I am a difficult man to fool, he said. My jeweller confirmed it. A key, he said, to a box that is its match. A box that, without this key, is impenetrable. Rosalind stood up. She was no longer the trembling mouse. She was someone else. She walked to the small, battered travel bag that Shaw had rescued from the mews of Bruton Street. It was the only thing she owned. She unbuckled the cheap leather straps and took out a small, unassuming box. It was a lady's dispatch box, covered in faded dark leather with brass corners. It was plain, simple, and utterly unremarkable, save for one detail. Where the keyhole should have been, there was only a small, decorative silver inlay, shaped like a teardrop. Alistair felt his pulse quicken. It was the exact shape of the pendant. Rosalind took the pendant from his hand. Her fingers were trembling, but not from fear, from anticipation. My mother told me this was my story, she whispered. She told me to keep it safe until I had no other choice, until I met someone I could trust. She looked at him, her grey eyes searching his. She said I would know. She said the man who saw the key for what it was, and not the glass, would be the man who could help me. She held the pendant over the inlay. I have been accused, humiliated, and thrown into the street. I believe your grace. I have no other choice. Alistair watched as she pressed the tip of the crystal pendant into a tiny, hidden aperture in the silver inlay. There was a faint, satisfying click. She turned the pendant. The sound of a complex, oiled mechanism shifting within the box was loud in the silent room. A hidden seam in the wood popped open. Rosalind lifted the lid. Alistair stepped forward. The box was not full of jewels or gold. It was full of paper, old letters tied in ribbon, a slim, leather-bound journal, and on top of it all, a single, folded, official-looking document. Rosalind picked it up, her hands shaking. She unfolded it. It's a marriage certificate, she breathed, her eyes scanning the faded ink. Dated 21 years ago, from the parish of St. George, Hanover Square. Whose names? Alistair asked, his voice tense. Rosalind read the names. Catherine Moberly and Arthur Grayson. Alistair felt the blood drain from his face. Arthur Grayson? Are you certain? Yes, why? Who is that? Alistair stared at the document, then at Rosalind, as if seeing her for the first time. The auburn hair, the intelligent eyes, the proud, defiant chin. It all made a terrible, sudden sense. Rosalind, he said, his voice hushed. Arthur Grayson was not a vicar. He was Lord Arthur Grayson, the younger, disgraced brother of the Duke of Carlisle, a man who supposedly died in debt and disgrace on the continent, unmarried and childless. His entire estate was absorbed by his cousin, Lord Barnaby Grayson. He pointed to the journal. What does it say? Rosalind opened the journal. Her mother's neat, elegant script filled the page. She read aloud, "My dearest Rosalind, if you are reading this, I am gone, and our enemies have won. You are not Rosalind Hayes. You are Rosalind Grayson. Your father, Arthur, did not abandon us. We were married in secret, against his family's wishes. When his brother died, he was the rightful heir to the Carlisle fortune, not his cousin Barnaby. Barnaby knew of our marriage, of you. He intercepted our letters. He spread lies that your father was a debtor and a traitor. He paid men to drive us from our home. He forced your father to flee to France, promising he would send for us. But it was a lie. Your father died in exile, alone, believing we had abandoned him. Barnaby Grayson stole your name, your home, and your inheritance. He told the world I was a mistress and you were a bastard. These letters, this certificate, they are the only proof. Trust no one, my love, but find justice." Rosalind sank onto the chaise, the papers fluttering from her grip. She wasn't a servant. She wasn't a vicar's daughter. She was the rightful heir to one of the largest fortunes in England. And the man who had stolen it, Lord Barnaby Grayson, was one of the most respected, pious and powerful peers in the House of Lords. The offices of Messrs. Thorne and Hardcastle, in the ancient, soot-stained heart of Lincoln's Inn, were the most formidable legal chambers in London. It was here, 2 days later, that the final act of a 20-year conspiracy would play out. Rosalind sat at the head of the long mahogany table. She was no longer in a servant's grey or a borrowed blue. She was wearing a dress of deep emerald velvet, procured by Alistair's agents, that broadcast wealth and power. She looked every inch the aristocrat she was born to be. At her side sat Alistair, the Duke of Ashworth. He was not there as her saviour, but as her ally. Opposite them sat a visibly sweating Lord Barnaby Grayson, a portly, pious-looking man whose facade of respectability was crumbling with every tick of the grandfather clock. His own solicitor looked pale and defeated. "It is a forgery," Barnaby blustered, his fingers drumming on the table. "Ah, a desperate, pathetic attempt at extortion. This girl is a known thief. She was dismissed from the Finch household for stealing." "A charge that was publicly withdrawn," Alistair said, his voice like silk-wrapped steel. "A charge which, if you ever repeat it, will see you in court for slander. We are not here to discuss Lady Honoria's mistakes. We are here to discuss yours." Rosalind spoke, her voice clear and strong. It did not tremble. "You will address me as Miss Grayson, my lord. Or perhaps as my father's daughter. I should simply call you cousin." The blood drained from Barnaby's face. Alistair's solicitor, Mr. Thorne, a man with eyes like a hawk, slid the marriage certificate across the table. "This, Lord Barnaby, is the original certificate from St. George's. We have had it verified by the vicar. It is genuine." He slid the letters across. "These are letters from you to Lord Arthur, postmarked in France, confirming you would take care of his wife and child after he fled. Taking care of them, it seems, meant erasing them." He slid the journal across. "And this is Lady Catherine's journal, detailing the payments your agents made to her, threatening her with ruin if she ever revealed her daughter's true identity. The dates match your bank ledgers, which, by fortunate coincidence, the Duke of Ashworth's bank also holds." Barnaby looked trapped. He was. What? What do you want? He whispered. The fight gone. Money. I will pay you. A handsome settlement. For your silence. Rosalind looked at Alistair, and he gave a slight nod. This was her battle. I want my name, Rosalind said. I want my father's name, restored and cleared of the debts you fabricated. I want my inheritance, the Grayson estate in Kent, and the Carlisle titles and properties that should have been my father's, and are now mine. That is impossible, Barnaby shrieked. It would ruin me. It would be a scandal. The entire ton would be... I would be destroyed. Yes, Rosalind said, her voice cold. That is the traditional consequence of theft and fraud. You destroyed my mother. You left her to die in poverty. You stole my father's life and honor. You sentenced me to a life of servitude and abuse. You do not deserve a handsome settlement. You deserve Newgate. But the scandal! That, Alistair interjected, is the only thing we are willing to negotiate. Not for your sake, Grayson. For hers. He looked at Rosalind. A public court case would drag Miss Grayson's name, and her mother's, through the mud for months. The gossip columns would feast on it. It would be unpleasant. Rosalind understood. She would win, but she would be marked for life. Here is the offer, Alistair said, leaning forward. You will sign a full confession, to be held in trust by Mr. Thorne. You will immediately sign over the deeds to the Grayson estate and the full contents of the Carlisle Trust. You will announce to the ton that you are retiring from public life due to a sudden and severe illness. And in return, Barnaby stammered. In return, Rosalind said, my mother's journal and your letters will not be delivered to the editors of the Times. It was a total, unconditional surrender. Barnaby, seeing the prison bars looming, snatched the pen and signed every document Mr. Thorne put in front of him. He was a broken man. As he stumbled from the room, he looked at Rosalind, his eyes full of hatred. You may have the money, he spat, but you will never be one of us. You are, and always will be, a servant girl in a borrowed dress. Rosalind stood up, tall and unflinching. No, Lord Barnaby, I am a Grayson, and you are dismissed. 1 month later, Rosalind Grayson stood on the wide, balustraded stone terrace of Grayson Park in Kent, the estate of her father, her home. Autumn had laid a rich, melancholy carpet of gold and crimson across the sweeping lawns that rolled down to a misty, tree-lined lake. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from a distant tenant farm, and the damp, sweet decay of the turning leaves. The house at her back was a masterpiece of Palladian architecture, graceful, grand and silent. It was beautiful, but it was a sad, empty beauty. It was a house that had been unloved for 20 years, and she understood its loneliness. She was now, by every measure, one of the wealthiest women in England. Her name, Rosalind Grayson, was on the lips of every gossip in the ton. The scandal had been seismic. Lord Barnaby Grayson's sudden, catastrophic illness that had forced his immediate and permanent retirement from public life was the talk of every club on St. James's. The equally sudden appearance of a long-lost, legitimate heiress, miraculously discovered by the unimpeachable Duke of Ashworth, was the stuff of penny dreadfuls. And then there were the Finches. Lady Honoria and Beatrice had been forced to print a retraction and a grovelling apology in the Times and the Morning Post, confessing their grievous error in accusing Miss Grayson of theft. The apology, penned by Alistair's ruthless solicitors, had been a masterpiece of social assassination. The Finches were ruined. No one would receive them. Their invitations were rescinded, their names a byword for malicious, failed scheming. Rosalind felt no triumph in it. She just felt tired. She had won, but the victory felt hollow. She had her name, she had her fortune, she had her justice, but she was, once again, completely alone. Alistair had been the model of propriety. After the signing at Lincoln's Inn, he had escorted her to a carriage, bowed over her hand, and said, "Your solicitors will handle the transfer of all properties, Miss Grayson. I wish you well." And he had vanished. He had retired to his own vast estates, leaving her to navigate the labyrinth of her new life, a life he had single-handedly given back to her. In her hand, she held the teardrop pendant. It was no longer on its chain. It was just an object, a smooth piece of crystal, cold to the touch. It was the key that had unlocked her cage. But what did one do with a key once the door was open? It felt redundant, a relic of a life that already felt like a dream. She heard the sound before she saw him, the crunch of expensive leather boots on the gravel path that wound around the side of the house. Her heart didn't stop. It gave a painful, hopeful lurch. She didn't need to turn. She knew that steady, confident tread. She had been listening for it for 31 days. She turned slowly. Alistair Vane stood not 10 yards away, framed by the arch of a climbing rose, now bare of its flowers. He was not the dark, imposing Duke of the Ballroom, nor the avenging General of the Law Office. He was dressed in a simple, perfectly tailored riding coat of deep blue wool, his boots polished but clearly worn, his cravat tied with functional elegance. He held his riding crop in one hand and his hat in the other. He looked, for the first time, simply like a man who looked slightly uncertain. "Your Grace," she said. Her voice was steady, but she clutched the pendant so tightly its edges dug into her palm. "Miss Grayson," he replied. He walked forward, his dark eyes sweeping over her, not with the bored appraisal of the ton, but with a genuine, searching warmth. "Rosalind, you seem at home." "I am trying to be," she said, her honesty a reflex with him. "The house is very large. The silence is pronounced. I am not yet accustomed to the echo of my own footsteps." "I know the feeling," he said, coming to stand beside her at the balustrade. He didn't look at her, but out over the rolling hills of her new domain. A large house is the loneliest place in the world, if you are the only one in it. A comfortable silence settled between them, a rarity for them both. "I came," he said at last, breaking the quiet, "to say goodbye." Rosalind's stomach hollowed out. The cold from the stone terrace seemed to seep into her bones. "Goodbye? Where are you going?" "The continent. Paris, then perhaps Rome. I find London tiresome. The season is over, and I have no taste for partridge shooting." "I see." Her voice was small. "Well, I wish you safe travels, Your Grace. I do not know how to thank you. For everything. You saved my life. You gave me back my father's name." "Alistair?" "Please," he said, turning to her, his gaze insistent. "My name is Alistair, and you misunderstand. I gave you nothing. You had your name all along. You had the truth in your possession. You simply lacked the leverage. Leverage I would never have had without you. You did that yourself, Rosalind," he said, his voice softening. "I only opened the door. You were the one brave enough to walk through it, to face down Grayson, to reclaim your life. I have known ladies of the highest birth who would have crumbled." His eyes dropped to her clenched fist. "You still have it." She opened her hand, showing him the crystal teardrop. It is the key to my whole life. My mother called it my story." "It was," he corrected gently. He reached out, his gloved fingers brushing hers as he gently took the pendant from her. "It was your story, the story of Catherine and Arthur, the story of a hidden past. But she was wrong about one thing. It is not your story. You are your story. This is just a key to a box. It has served its purpose. Its magic is spent." He held it up, the pale autumn light catching its facets. "I, on the other hand, am in possession of something far more valuable." "You are," she whispered, her heart beginning a frantic, wild drumbeat. He reached into his waistcoat pocket. He did not pull out a key. He pulled out a small, dark blue velvet box. It was from Garrard's. He opened it. Rosalind gasped. Inside, nestled on white satin, was a ring. It was not a gaudy cluster of gems, no ducal heirloom heavy with centuries of expectation. It was a single, breathtakingly pure diamond, cut by the finest artisan in London into a perfect, flawless teardrop. "The jeweller at Garrard's was so taken with the design of your key," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a husky murmur, "that I commissioned a companion piece. He assures me this one is not glass. This one is a promise." Before she could process, he was down on one knee on the cold stone, holding the ring up to her. "Your Grace." "Alistair, what are you doing?" "Rosalind Grayson," he said, and his eyes, no longer cold or bored, were blazing with a fire of raw, unfiltered emotion that took her breath away. "I am not interested in your title, which you now share with half the peerage. I am not impressed by your fortune, which I can match 3 times over. I am, however, completely and irrevocably in love with your mind, your courage, and your magnificent, unyielding refusal to be broken. I met you when you were a servant in a borrowed dress, trembling in a corner, and you were more real, more intelligent, and more alive than any woman I have ever known. You were the equal of any duchess. I see you now as a great heiress, and you are, thank God, still just—" "Rosalind." He took her left hand, his grip warm and strong. "I have no desire to go to the continent. It is the last place on earth I wish to be. I want to stay here, with you. I want to help you fill this empty, beautiful house with laughter, and books, and terrible arguments about philosophy, and children. I want to read Austen with you by the fire, and I want you to tell me my cannons are poorly placed. I do not care that the ton will say I married a woman they tried to destroy. Let them talk. I am marrying the only person in the world who has ever truly seen me. The man, and not the title." Tears were streaming down Rosalind's face, but for the first time in her life, they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. She was not humiliated. She was not afraid. She was seen. "Will you marry me, Rosalind? Not because I am a duke, or because you are an heiress, but because we are 2 lonely people who, by some miracle, found each other in the middle of a masquerade." She was laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick. "Yes, oh yes, Alistair, I will." He slid the diamond teardrop onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It felt warm, as if it had been waiting for her. He stood, rising to his full height, and framed her face in his hands, gently brushing the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. He still held the crystal pendant in his other hand. "And what," he asked, his smile tender, "should we do with this? This relic of your past?" Rosalind smiled, a true, brilliant smile that transformed her face. She took the key from him. She looked at it one last time, the object that had been her only link to a dead mother, the proof of a stolen life, the catalyst for her entire future. She walked to the very edge of the stone terrace, and with a strength she didn't know she possessed, she drew back her arm and threw the pendant as hard as she could. It sailed through the crisp autumn air, a tiny speck of light arcing over the lawn, and vanished without a splash into the deep, dark woods that bordered the estate. It was gone. She was free. She turned back to him. He was watching her, his expression one of profound love. She walked into his arms, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath her palms. "It was a key," she said, looking up at him, "and it has finally unlocked its door." Alistair smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes and crinkled their corners. "Then let us," he murmured, "go inside and begin our story." He lowered his head and kissed her. It was not the chaste, proper kiss of the aristocracy. It was a kiss of promise, of passion, and of a future finally, dazzlingly begun. The world tried to break Rosalind, to tell her she was a nobody, a piece of furniture, a common thief. But they all made one fatal mistake. They underestimated her. They saw a worthless piece of glass, but Alistair saw a key. Sometimes the thing that society tells you is worthless is the one thing that holds all the power. And the greatest revenge isn't just winning back a fortune. It's finding a love that sees you for who you truly are. If you were moved by Rosalind's story of justice and romance, please show your support by hitting that like button. It truly helps our channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss another story of love, loss, and the incredible twists of fate. Share this video with someone who loves a good story, and let us know in the comments, what was the moment you knew the Duke was different? We'll see you in the next one.